Recently, I asked you in a poll who was the most impactful mentor or father figure out of 3 Arcane's most prominent ones. Vander to Vi, Silco to Jinx, or Grayson to Caitlyn. And to no surprise, Vander by far won, which will be our next video. But for now, I want to focus on, well, the loser, Grayson. Which is a shame really, because while I understand why she lost, I still think her impact on Caitlyn was probably bigger than we were ever shown. And that's precisely the reason why we don't talk about her enough. We barely get glimpses of that relationship. Glimpses of her personality and ideals. We don't even know if mentorship itself went far beyond asking Caitlyn the most fundamental question that she no doubt repeated to herself once more in the future, and eventually found an ultimate answer to. While episode 1 of Arcane focused almost entirely on showing us who Vi and Vander are, who is Vi as a leader, what are the ideals that Vander is trying to pass on to her, and how she, similarly to himself in the past, is still pretty hesitant to assume those ideals. While we were shown excessively Silco's influence on Powder, going as far as transforming her into Jinx, we didn't get much to go on with when it comes to people who mentored Caitlyn and thus shaped her. Her mother, her father, Grayson, Maddie, no, just kidding, later on Ambessa. Today I want to talk about Grayson, more importantly the influence she might have passed on to Caitlyn, because as a character of her own, we barely know anything. We weren't given enough information to truly define her. She was one of the first characters to die. She was an enforcer who was actually noble and willing to do her job correctly. Chief of the enforcers, avoiding casualties no matter what. Opposite of Marcus, having a deal with Vander not to enter open conflict. A deal that possibly saved many lives over the years, which isn't really widely known nor appreciated.
Who was this, Daddy?
A good woman.
That very same deal, however, was also strongly conservative. Vander agreed to avoid casualties, carrying the trauma from their own revolution, the burden of Vi and Powder's parents' death. Grayson agreed to it to avoid more bloodshed, but end of the day what they really agreed on was to settle for less, seal the permanent inequality situation, Zone's inability to ever fight for more. Grayson actively played a part in passively oppressing the Undercity. But it was a world that everyone has participated in, starting from the council members, going through the nobles, Piltover Enforcers Sheriff, ending with low-rank forces. While I believe her intentions were honest, she was still the one getting the most out of this uneven agreement. She was fair towards Caitlyn, however, and she still believes she's doing her part as best as she could given the circumstances, and so did Vander. Now we don't know too much about the young Caitlyn either. She wasn't given nearly as much screen time as Vi or Powder, but still, the time she was given told us so much about her already. She was just, fair, curious. First time we see her, she's asking questions about Zone. Second time we see her, she's defending Jace. Third time we see her, she's admitting she is an outcast. As an outcast, she used to spend time with Grayson hunting. It's probably not Grayson that taught her to shoot though. That much we know. The painting in Kuraman Mansion suggests that's an activity tied to her very essence from her earliest years. Maybe she was taught to hunt back in Demacia or Ionia, where the painting was seemingly taken. Her standing with a rifle by Raptor's corpse indicates she was well versed in the art of gun handling even as a child. Who passed this passion on to her? It's possible her father loved to shoot, as during the party celebrating Caitlyn's victory in the shooting contest, he was proudly showing off a gun. Her mother could handle a rifle as well, as we once were directly shown. We can also assume hunting is a noble enough activity her mother turned a blind eye to, but it did lead to something she was later on not exactly fond of. Caitlyn becoming an enforcer. Because hunting is one thing, but Caitlyn needed to know the purpose as to why she's holding a gun. That's when Grayson became very important, providing her a very specific direction.
I'm an enforcer. For me, knowing how to handle this weapon means being able to protect people, to be of service to the city. That's trophy enough. Begs the question, young Kerman. What are you shooting for?
Although we weren't shown that directly, it feels like Caitlyn needed to ask herself that question at least 3 times. Once prior to the main events, once in Season 1, and again in Season 2. She asked herself that when she first became an enforcer, going against her mother, realizing she's a misfit. Clearly, conversation with Grayson happened before her conversation with Jace when she admitted she is an outcast, since at this point, Grayson was soon to die due to Silco's scheme. So the idea that she doesn't exactly belong among the nobles, that she won't be a council member carrying the Kiraman name and ideals that weren't always perfect, was already there, and planted by Grayson. She asked herself that for the second time when she was given a fairly secure forces position, almost abused within the ranks due to Marcus's low self-esteem, willing to do more, wanting to do more, but not being given the right opportunity, not being able to truly fulfill her ambitions. That's when her Jinx investigation started. That's when she stumbled upon Vi in Stillwater Prison. That's when she realized Vi is being held there despite no formal sentence. That there is, in fact, a great conspiracy. And the rest is history. During her time in Zone as an undercover enforcer, or technically fired enforcer, no one seems to notice that she was actually fired. She not only protected Vi, the one purpose that she will always be shooting for from now on. One single purpose she would even give up her gun for. She was also doing her best to use her position to protect Zone. Again, that sense of justice must have been at least partially planted by Grayson, and possibly partially, as we later on found out, by her mother.
The people of the underground deserve to breathe.
Now that, as we know, changed later on in Season 2 when Caitlyn became incredibly antagonized once her mother died. She was not only abusing her role as chief of the enforcers, she was also abusing her role as Ambessa proclaimed commander of the city, oppressing the lanes in search for Jinx, turning a blind eye to what her anti-mentor Ambessa was doing, focusing too much on her own hunt while neglecting the city. Ambessa seemed to serve exactly the opposite role to Grayson back in Season 1. While Grayson allowed Caitlyn to grow, to choose her own way and future position, Ambessa manipulating Caitlyn towards a specific role. That's precisely the moment when she needed to ask herself that question for the third time. And luckily she did find her answer soon enough to save the day. To realize she doesn't want to be a commander. She doesn't even want to be part of the council. She just wants to do her job, protect the people, be of service to the city, which circles back to her conversation with Grayson. So it's clear that despite the fact Grayson was no longer there, that in greater scheme of things she wasn't even as important, not nearly as important as Vander or Silco. Caitlyn ended up exactly where Grayson set up a path for her. Interestingly so, same thing happened with Vi, although her way of getting there seemed to be precisely carved, almost wrapped up with entire Arcane's plot, beginning and end. And funnily enough, Grayson's deal with Vander, Piltover and Zone representatives coming together for a greater good, served as a wonderful metaphor that never was given quite enough time. It also serves as much more than that. After all, both Vander and Grayson were mentors to Vi and to Caitlyn. Did they ever take time to properly discuss that? I'd like to think that yes. Since Grayson was important enough to be a person adult Caitlyn thinks of, and right before meeting Vi too, I'd like to think one day, while sitting by the fire, they shared their memories. Vi knew, thanks to Echo, that Grayson had a deal with Vander. So end of the day, it's possible to put it together and realize they were connected far before they met. Far before they ended up on opposite sides of Powder's blast that divided the city once more. I'd like to think that they realized they not only ended up being exactly who their mentors shaped them up to be, but they also share a very similar bond to them, by the end of Arcane, carrying on their legacy. Thanks so much for watching, major shout out to my patrons.